as much as I was working, the payoff was not worth it. So there you are.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Dustin Harris sitting in the podcast chair once again. I want to talk to you a little bit about, the E-Myth, a little bit about the difference between a technician and a business owner, and maybe a decision that you might make that I've made in my own business that I think might be helpful in helping you to move from where you're at to possibly where you want to go. I want to pause here and remind you that we are sponsored by 3 great companies, of course, DataMaster being one of them. The ability to save 30 to 60 minutes per report, that's DataMaster. You can find out more at datamasterusa.com. Again, it's datamasterusa.com. We are sponsored by Working RE Magazine. Working RE is where I go to find out what's going on in the appraisal world. You should be as well. They have a free newsletter that goes out a couple times a week, folks. WorkingRE.com is where it's at. Again, WorkingRE.com. And finally, we are sponsored by Alamode. Alamode, of course, is the software that I use to be a technician in my appraisal business, which we're going to be talking about today. But to be a more effective, more efficient technician, that's what Alamode does for me, and it can do the same for you. Alamode.com or 800-ALAMODE. All right, folks, I've had an opportunity over the last couple of weeks to do a lot of coaching. And it's coming off the refi boom, and I get it. I understand it. I think most appraisers feel worked to death. I kind of got sucked into that a little bit as well, where I found myself for a short period of time, thankfully, working more than 40 hours a week in my business. And when I say in my business, I mean in my business as a technician. And I didn't like it. I enjoy appraising, but I don't love it. And I certainly don't love being away from my family. I certainly don't enjoy working evenings, working weekends, working some holidays. I didn't like that at all. And it became very apparent, I thought it was a short-term thing. Here's the mistake that I made. Things got busy, and we simply did not have the manpower to handle the throughput for the extra orders. So at that point, I have 2 choices, right? I can either turn down orders, which I guess I'm selfish. I said no to that option, which left me with a second option, which means, hey, Dustin, guess what? You know how you're not used to working 40 hours a week as an appraiser technician? Guess what? If you're going to accept these orders, you don't have the capability to ask more of your team than you are currently asking. That means that's on you, buddy. That means you get to do that, right? And so that's a role that I inadvertently accepted. And I thought it was a short-term thing. I thought that the refi boom, when it happened in May, wouldn't last to June, wouldn't last to July, and it just kept getting busier. In fact, we broke records in May. Okay, May 2019 was the biggest month I had ever had in 23 years of doing business up to that point. Ever. We beat it in June. We beat it in July. We beat that one in August. We beat that one in September. I didn't think it was even possible, but we beat that one in October. And you see how the pattern went. Okay. And what happened was, even though I thought that the refi boom would be short-lived, it was not short-lived. And as a consequence, when I thought, I can work extra hours for a short term. I want to please my clients, right? I want to make hay when the sun shines, right? I fell into all the traps that as a coach, I teach people not to fall into, at least long-term. And my justification, was it's going to be short-term, right? This is a principle, yes, and Dustin, you're teaching this as a coach to make sure that you're extracting yourself from the day-to-day and that you're not working too hard. But in the short term, hey, let's make an exception. Dumb, okay? Dumb. That's where I was. That's what I did. I was not happy. And my wife was not happy. And my kids were not happy. And it just wasn't happy all the way around. And we maybe have made some money, right? We may have socked away some things for a rainy day, thankfully. it wasn't worth it. I can tell you that right up front. And very soon into this process, within about a month and a half, I knew that something had to change. And thankfully, I reached out in my network and I found a helper bee, and she has been a godsend. And it was a very short time that I had to train and bring somebody on that helped to relieve the pressure off of my shoulders, thankfully. Okay, but through that process, I learned something about myself. And I learned that thing about myself with a combination of looking at my finances, okay, on one hand, and also just looking at my lifestyle, looking at what was going on in my world. And by looking at both of those things, meaning, Dustin, you're working too much, okay? And here's the funny thing, okay? I'm not going to get into the details on the numbers. I do that with my all-star team, my dream team. But here on the podcast, I will just say this. I looked at my numbers at the end of this big run, or at least in the midst of this big run, after I got past the working 40, 50, sometimes 60 hours a week process, when I finally started paying someone else to do some of the work that I was doing. And I sat down and I started to do the math. Okay. Now, I've told you before, and I'll tell you again, I am not a math buff. I hated math in school. I did not do well in math in school. Let's put it this way, I had to take stats during a summer session where I had no other classes and I had to get a full-time tutor in order to I think I ended up getting a C plus maybe. I mean, that's how good I am at math, right? Or as they say down under, maths. The bottom line is as a business owner, I've learned to respect numbers. Maybe not necessarily like them, but the thing that I like about math is it doesn't lie. The thing I like about stats is they're real. The thing I don't like about it is I hate the numbers. I hate the process. I hate looking at a page, right? I don't enjoy doing a balance sheet and looking at my balance sheet and my P&L. I don't enjoy that at all, but I do it. And the reason I do it is I found very early on in the process of running my own business that if I don't do it, that it gets away from me. If I don't do it, I end up in trouble. If I don't do it, then I end up like most small business owners, and that is out of business. And so I've learned on a regular basis to work on my business and not in my business, that I take time from being a technician to be a business owner and to actually look at the numbers and see what they're doing. And here's what happened. Okay, I'm just going to give you the 5,000-foot view. I thought that by working so many hours and busting my can for so many weeks that I was going to bring home, for lack of a better term, a buttload of money, right? Thank you to Napoleon Dynamite for that phrase. And guess what? It didn't happen. Now, did I make more money during those months? Yes, I did. But when I actually started crunching the numbers, you know what I found out? Yeah, I know, duh, Dustin. I was paying myself to be a technician. I was paying myself to work in my business. I was paying myself by the hour to do extra work, and it wasn't worth it. So I've come up with an idea. And I think it'll work. I know it'll work. And you'll know it works when I get back from the break, because I'm going to lay it out for you, and I'm going to encourage you to do the same thing. I want to pause here and remind you and encourage you, rather, to do the same thing as I am, and that is using A La Mode software. A La Mode, of course, is the software I've been using for over 20 years, and I've often been asked, why? Why, Dustin? Why do you use A La Mode? I use such and such, and it's great. And guess what? I agree. It is great. The reason I use A La Mode is because it allows me to accomplish my mission as a real estate appraiser business owner. And that is that I want to be as efficient as possible. I want to have all the tools at my fingertips that will allow me to be able to do reports more efficiently and with higher quality. A La Mode does both of those things with the tools that they put out in their appraisal form filling software. Check them out. Go to alamode.com, or you can call them at 800 A La Mode. We, of course, we're sponsored by DataMaster. DataMaster is the ability to save about 45 minutes per report. Now, I want you to think just for a moment, folks, about how many reports that you do a week, or better yet, let's talk about a month. How many reports do you do per month? Okay. Now, I can tell you on average, most individuals do about 30, okay? On average, most appraisers do about 30 reports a month, okay? If you do the math on that, okay, again, numbers don't lie, that is 1,350 minutes, okay, that you can save by using DataMaster. What does that mean? That means you're saving almost 2 days, 2 full days, 22.5 hours worth of time. Think about that. What could you do with another 22 hours in your month? That's what DataMaster will save you. I kid you not. Check them out. Go to datamasterusa.com. Again, it's datamasterusa.com. Finally, we're sponsored by Working RE Magazine. You know, on a pretty regular basis, I wake up in the morning and I have an email in my inbox from Working RE. Now, let me tell you the process I go through. I typically click on it and I look at, what the subject line is. If it's something I'm interested in, I might click on that. I might skim it. I might read it. Okay. Or I might say, you know what, that's not really for me. That's the process I go through. But as a reward, by being signed up for Working RE's email on a very regular basis, a couple of times a month, I get really pertinent, forward-thinking information about the appraisal world. You should be as well. Check them out by going to workingre.com. Sign up for their free e-newsletter. If you're not interested in some of the things, archive them, delete them, move on. But I guarantee at least once, twice a month, you're going to find articles that will very much pertain to what you're dealing with in your own business. It's workingre.com. One more time, workingre.com. All right, folks, we are back and we're talking today about, paying yourself like a technician, okay? Now, I'm just going to briefly give you the overview of the tiers, okay? And frankly, I'm just going to focus on 2 of them. I've talked about the tiers here before. It's something that we talk about. If you do personal private coaching with me, the tiers are something we talk about a lot, okay? Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4, Tier 5, okay? And Tier 6 is the new one. Tier 6 means I've sold my appraisal business, okay? But we're going to be talking about 2 tiers specifically today, and that's Tier 3, which is the technician side. This is being an appraiser, being an analyst, okay? Being what it is that you went to school and trained under a mentor to do, okay? That's inspections. Well, inspections really fit under Tier 2, but because you have a license, a lot of times you have to be the one on inspection. So for today's process, we'll call that Tier 3. Inspection, choosing comps, adjustments, explaining what you did in the report, those kind of things, okay? The analyst side of you. And then, of course, there's Tier 5. Tier 5 is business ownership. That's the CEO. That's the visionary. That's the top-down looking individual, okay? Now, during this process that I went through over the last several months during the refi boom, I learned very quickly that I was working myself to death and I really wasn't making that much more money. Why not? Well, the reason is because I was simply paying myself to be a technician, but I wasn't actually taking a paycheck for it, okay? So go with me on this. Through 2019, the way that I was set up, tax-wise, okay, is that I was an employee of the company. Okay, I've got a corporation, an S-Corp. I was an employee of the company and thus took a salary. Okay, that salary was based on what a typical appraiser makes in my area. And I've got documentation to support that in case I ever get audited. But it's a minimal amount. Okay, most of the money that I receive come through the form of dividends. Okay. And consequently, and by the way, I am not an accountant, I am not a lawyer, I'm not a financial strategist, okay? So I'm just explaining to you how my business works, not necessarily encouraging you to make any changes, okay? But the process is I was being paid a salary no matter how many hours I worked, okay? You following this? So I'm being paid twice. Being paid as a business owner, that's called dividends, okay? And then I was being paid as a technician, that's called my salary. Now, because it's a salary and because it's not based on the number of hours that I've worked, I get paid the same to do that no matter how many hours I work. Now, the idea was if I work more hours, the company will make more, and thus my dividend check would be bigger. And it was, okay? But it wasn't that much bigger. And here's why. Because when we were busy, I had to pay overtime. I had to pay my individuals that might possibly work 30, 35 hours a week on average. We're now working 40, sometimes 42, sometimes 44 hours a week. And again, we're talking overtime, but even if we weren't into the overtime, if they were normally 35 and now they're working 40, I'm paying them for 5 more hours that week that I hadn't been paying before. We picked up a couple of new individuals because we just couldn't keep up with the tier 1, tier 2 stuff. So my payroll increased on that side. Okay, are you following this? In other words, it was more expensive to run the business to take care of the extra orders that we had coming in. Now, I will tell you this, again, not getting into numbers, I will tell you this. We did make pretty good money during the refi boom, okay? But I will say this, it was surprising when I sat down to do the numbers. It was surprising to me that it wasn't that much more. It was far short of what I anticipated or expected, especially coming off of the hours and hours and hours that I was working. I expected to be rich, and I wasn't. Well off, yes. Doing well, yes. Able to put quite a bit of money into an escrow account for a rainy day, yes, absolutely. Very happy for that, right? Very happy for that. But as much as I was working, I guess I would boil it down to this. As much as I was working, the payoff was not worth it. So there you are. At that point, as a business owner, I make a decision. Where do I go from here? And I'll tell you where I've gone from here. Here's what I'm changing in 2020. Okay, I pay my technicians, tier 3, okay, appraisers, a percentage of the overall gross. Okay, let me repeat that. I pay my technicians or my appraisers a percentage of the overall growth. Okay. I don't pay them by the hour. I pay them a percentage, a commission. They don't work on a salary, okay, for obvious reasons. I would not expect my technicians to do what I did during the refi boom. I would not expect them to work 60 hours and not get paid for 60 hours, okay? I would expect that they would get paid for their salary and overtime if they worked those kind of hours. And as a consequence, I started asking myself, well, Dustin, if you wouldn't expect your appraisers to do that, why in the hell are you expecting yourself to do the same thing? Yeah, I know. Slap your forehead and do the Homer do, right? Why was I doing that when I don't do that for anyone else? Why was I treating myself worse than I treat my employees? So here's the change. Beginning in 2020, Dustin doesn't make a salary anymore. Beginning in 2020, Dustin gets paid like everybody else. So if I do a percentage of the appraisal, I get paid a percentage of the overall fee as my salary, okay, which is different than dividends. Now, what will this do moving forward? Well, I hope it will open my eyes to what it is I'm actually doing. I hope I will feel compensated when I do play the role of technician. But more importantly, I think it will move me closer to my goal. And my goal is eventually mostly tier 5. I don't see myself ever being out of tier 3 because as a coach, I think I need to have my toe in that water. But eventually I'd like to be tier 5 most of the time, 95% of the time. Okay? And as a consequence, the only way to do that is to know what it's going to cost to replace myself. And the only way I'm going to know that is to stop paying myself a salary and start paying myself a commission, just like I pay everyone else that's a tier 3 individual. I promise to report on how it proceeds this coming year, so stay tuned. Folks, if you've not joined my All-Star team, I highly recommend that you do. Once a month, we meet together for an interactive, no question off the table session. Now, the first part of that session is kind of a webinar style. It's more about a principle, a practice, an idea that will help you to move forward in your business. But the second half is really where we get into the nuts and bolts of your business. It's called the micro mentoring session. And you can bring to the table any question you want. Okay? Any question that you might have, you bring to the table. and we will talk about it.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.
And go to products. Actually, sorry, let me do that again.